Do you want to talk about the advantage Starco Brands has having the backing of Starco Group and kind of
Sure.
how it all fits together? Maybe for someone, using Breathe as an example, maybe walk through why it's a benefit, but also how the whole thing works together.
Yeah. Look, if you didn't have the infrastructural capability and mass and machine as large as Starco Group is today, it would be very difficult to create what we want to create in Starco Brands. Um, Look, there's been many, little startups that are considered to be sort of developing indie brands, if you will, that are cute and they've got great marketing and so on and so forth. They even sometimes work on their formulas to get them good and bring in outside help. But they're typically out there shopping for co-packing relationships, typically to guys like me that own that kind of infrastructure. And then it becomes a very specific negotiation. And in startups, you don't have the volume to really get good economics from a co-packer. So it's really tough to, make margin. And that's why a lot of those indie stage brands fail, because they're so unprofitable for so many years. And really the only ones that have a real fighting chance to make it are typically backed by VC, where they dump in tons of capital. They understand they're not going to be profitable for a couple of years. They dump in just tons of cash for the marketing aspect of things. And hopefully it takes on and all of a sudden it starts to scale and you can start to make money and they look to divest. That's a very stereotypical playbook that's been played by multiple VC firms in CPG. For us, because we're self-financed and we've got this whole, we already have all the infrastructure and the capability, we didn't need to do that. And so we could, sort of exploit this massive infrastructure where when we're launching these products, when they're in the early stages, where yes, the volumes weren't, quite there yet, because, we've got controls over both organizations, we could grandfather in nation's most favorite economics, even at startup. And so there's a financial structure in place. Because this is a public company, we've got to be holistically transparent about how that setup is organized. And the way it's organized is the manufacturing entity can never make more than a 25% gross margin on its manufacturing ever, no matter what. So it's a contractual obligation that's been, set in place and disclosed. So that gives the company a fair, as far as, compliance is concerned. There's things called transfer pricing in the IRS, and if we were to give it away for free or take a major loss, they could take issue with that and say, hey, well, that's not a normal margin in the marketplace, and therefore that's, there could be issues with that. But a 25% gross margin is a margin that the co-packer would be comfortable giving when you are selling a lot of products at scale. But when you're not at scale, it's an advantage to have that kind of, because a co-packer may say, hey, you're not selling a lot of products, I'm going to charge you 40%. So we've got this capability to grandfather in a nation's most favorite economics. That's a reasonable manufacturing margin from a contract manufacturer vantage point. But this allows Starco Brands to be off to the races and hit the markets and be competitive right away, as well as extremely profitable right away. So that infrastructure is really key. That relationship's really vital.
Yeah, I think you left out some stuff, but I'll say it in a second. At least things that stand out to me. So great, like you said, you're able to get the cost, like you were doing a massive volume, even if you're not. But the next part I wanted to kind of touch on, what's the benefit in terms of relationships, with companies? Imagine you want to sell a product in Walmart or you want to sell a product wherever, obviously because Starco Group has these relationships.
Yeah. So the first attribute was that we can really take advantage of the manufacturing relationship, right? And just to touch on that point one more time, we can get, nation's most favorite economics from a co-packing standpoint. We can also get use of their infrastructure, meaning the warehousing and the logistics, and you don't have to take the product in-house. And so all that overhead cost can be absorbed as part of what they do for Starco Brands. Going forward, the Starco Group, sells almost every single retailer in the nation of any consequence. And, if you're selling, a big box retailer, typically the buyers in specific departments, the same buyers that buy branded products, same buyers that buy, private label. Sometimes there's some differences, and you have to nuance those differences, but you already have vendor numbers set up with these retailers. And you already have the insurances in place to be able to supply products to them at scale. And these are very expensive, nuanced instruments that have to be put into place. Facilities have to go through, audits for compliance. They have to go through what's called ethical sourcing audits. There's a whole litany of hoops that someone needs to step through to be able to become, an at-scale and tiered supplier to the bricks and mortar retail landscape. And so that's already in place. And so that's a big deal. And on top of that, we already have, a very significant sales force that's in place, and rep network that's in place, and distributor network that's in place. So, typically that takes years for companies to develop and mature and have success with, have people that have buy-in. And so you sort of have, first you have R&D, then you have manufacturing, and then you have customer and account support, and then you have logistics, and then you have distribution, and then you have kind of your sales network, and then you have your customer service, and you have this massive infrastructure that you need to be able to appropriately service the biggest retailers on the planet. And that's in place and has been for a long time. So there's a lot for Starco brands to work with and play off of. And it's, really one of the driving forces that made this super interesting for us and management to really dedicate massive time and bandwidth towards. And so the reason that we could pull all that off with all that existing infrastructure and the capability to develop unique products made this a really compelling enterprise. Now, why in a public? And we touched on that before, right? We could have done this in the private. And the reason why we did it in the public is because of the reasons that we stated before, and our sentiment that we really want, public participation, because we feel like if you're, users of the products and buyers of the products, then you should also own the equity and participate in the wealth creation long term. We have a really big value set about that and feel very strongly about it.